And I'm Lenny Kluge.
We're two immigrants living in Chile, bringing you information on news, cultural topics, travel, business, and more.
The Chile Today podcast is the first ever bi-weekly English news podcast.
For more information about the news topics you will hear today, check out our news affiliate, chiletoday.cl.
If you have any questions, stories to share, or just want to say hi, message us on Instagram at Chile Today Podcast or email us at chiletodaypodcast@gmail.com.
If you're feeling generous, rate and review us so that more people can find our podcast. Crunch, 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 crunch.
You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Do the crunches?
Nom
Nom, 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 nom.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. What's going on? Hey, Lenny, how are you?
Hey, Bethany, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm amazing. You know why?
Oh, I don't know. Tell me about it.
I got engaged
No
about a
way.
week and a half ago. Yeah.
I was kind of teasing at it last episode. I don't know if you listened.
No, I didn't. I was in Disney World and I was getting engaged, so I didn't listen to the news section. Sorry.
No, I just said that Bethany's gone and she might come back with some news.
Oh yeah, I'm engaged. I'm getting married to my boyfriend of almost 6 years.
She's going
About fucking time.
16. Okay, I just heard 60. Well, you don't look that old.
My boyfriend of 60 years.
Yeah.
I look good.
I like him ripe.
Real good for 60.
I like him mature.
So that would make me at least like in my 80s if I had a boyfriend for 60 years. It would be like in my 80s. I guess it's not that big of a deal.
Be like, finally he popped the question.
Yeah.
It's about time.
So yeah, I've been in Disney World for the past 2 weeks, and it was amazing. I'm now on Disney withdrawal, physically and mentally, because of all the sugar I consumed. So now I'm just trying to survive without the processed
That's
food.
where the jitters come from.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. There you go. That's why I'm twitching over here. Good thing
That's why you
this is
have
not
this
a visual.
vibrating on your voice.
Yeah.
Tremolo.
So if I start talking really fast, it's because I don't have any sugar in my system. So.
You want another Mountain Dew?
Oh man, I didn't drink any Mountain Dew when I was in the U.S. No, I drank a lot of Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Yeah, so if you don't know, dear listeners, Dr. Pepper does exist here, but it is quite few and far between, and there's no Diet Dr. Pepper
I
here.
love Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper, he's my favorite doctor.
Yeah, and he's a real doctor.
Yeah, he is. So how are you? How have you been since I've been gone?
Been good.
Lonely, I see.
Yeah, of course.
Uh-huh.
Been good. Been busy. Actually, I have to think about like these couple of weeks went by very fast. It's just, I mean, I'm gonna be.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be traveling next week.
Yeah.
I'm also going to the U.S. for a couple of days, not to Disneyland though.
Disney World.
World, excuse me.
Get it right.
Please forgive me.
Will not.
No. No, I'll be going with my wife to New York for a couple of days, for like 10 days.
Fun.
So I've been kind of busy planning this thing, and then, work and other
planning
things,
trips.
and and before you know it, 2-3 weeks went by, and now I'm here.
Yeah, now we're here
Yeah.
together again, reunited. It feels so good. Yeah.
It's good.
So, before we get started on our news, whatever. We want to remind you guys of our Patreon. So we have 2 tiers of our Patreon. One, the first tier, just a $5 tier. It's really cool. You can get tip sheets every month, and also the tip sheets are there, like they don't disappear. So you can get all the tip sheets that we have that give you tip sheets on we have so far like the best places to watch, your international games if you're from wherever you're from and you want to catch a game. I know March Madness was recent, which I only know what that is because it sounds really cute and there's alliteration, but where to watch games like that.
Such an English teacher thing to say.
Also, we have some of the best places, like if you're just coming through, like really authentic Chilean places you can go, and then like different levels of authenticity, right? Like if you want to go really somewhere really authentic versus somewhere really like cutesy, you're gonna get
Touristy,
tacky, depending on what you want. We also have free tickets to events that are in the city, discount tickets, free beer, things like that. Also, through the Patreon, you can have a direct connection to us. The $10 level, you can have a connection to our Discord where you can talk and create chat boards about, like, help me with this visa, or does anybody know a dog walker in the city, or et cetera, et cetera. So that is really great. Also, at the $10 level, you will get some merch. So that's really great.
And all that for a cup of coffee.
All
with
that
how
for
the,
our
how
cup
the
of coffee
inflation
for
is
us.
going these days.
Oh yeah, so
Half a cup of coffee.
yeah. So there you go. So support us on Patreon. We're artists and work really hard to bring you this stuff. So even support us and you get some cool stuff back. So yeah. Speaking of events that you can get discounts or free, we have 3 events I think coming up that we know about in the city.
Yeah.
So what the first one is storytelling?
The first one is so much for good preparation here.
The trivia night?
Is the trivia night.
Okay, so the trivia night is on the 23rd of April, and that's bilingual trivia night, which is really accessible for any language level, where you make a team of up to 3. It's $6,000 to enter for non-Patreon patrons. It's $4,000 to enter for patrons. Basically, you get a $2,000 peso discount ticket. And it's really fun. Come with your friends. It's also a really good way to meet new people. Like, if you come alone, you can always get on another team. There's been recently, like a guy who came a few months ago, and now he has, like, forever friends that he always goes to things with now. And, like, they're, like, this
married.
team. No, not that.
Okay.
But it's a really good way to meet people. So if you're worried, like, oh, I'll be by myself, you won't. We'll put you on a team of somebody looking for someone else. It's really fun. It starts at 8 p.m. on the 23rd at the Black Rock Pub. We're going to have more information on our Instagram at She Lays Today Podcast, so check that out.
Yeah.
All of those things are going to stay the same for April as far as the events, and then in May they might change. But for the trivia night, 3 people per team.
Trivia night stays the same.
Trivia night's the same.
Everything changes. Trivia night stays the same.
Yeah.
You'll anchor
Where
in the
everyone knows
stormy
your
bay.
name. Yeah. The trivia night.
Everybody knows your name.
Yeah, people do get freaked out at the trivia night because I host it, and Pinguino also hosts it. They get freaked out because I host it. No, it's because I learn people's names. So if you're, like, new there, you're like, how does she know their name?
George.
And I'm like, because we have people who come back. It's really fun. It's really, really fun. It's actually, if you want to go, you should email us or email thatshestoleus@gmail.com who are the people that actually put it on. To make a reservation because space is limited. But enough about the trivia night. What's the next one?
The next one would be which is actually not a Chistolas event.
No.
Like, for a change. It's Chistolas affiliated, not even, but...
No, we're friends with them. That's
we
it.
know them, yeah.
They're other gringos.
They're buddies. They're other
the
gringos.
gringo sphere, as we like to say.
It's a storytelling, which is telling stories.
Yeah, people go there, tell, like...
Very self-descriptive.
Yeah, like a 5 or 10 minute story about their lives or, like, what they've been through.
Well, they usually have a theme.
Yeah, they have a theme. And, like, anybody can enter... I don't know. Do you know what it is this month? The theme? Is it Lost and Found?
It is Lost and Found.
Lost and Found. So it's people going and telling their stories. It's really fun. It can be kind of emotional sometimes. It can be funny sometimes. It's really nice. It's a free event. And that's going to be at Fiddler's when?
It is going to be on April 26th at Fiddler's Irish Bar next to Metro Monument. And it starts also at 8.
Great. 8 great.
8 great.
And then the last event is bilingual stand-up comedy on the 30th of April, and that's also at Fiddler's.
Yeah, you might as well just stay there for those couple of days. Just,
just
pitch a
sleep
tent.
there. And that one is a Chistolas event.
Not that kind of tent.
It starts at 8:30? 8:30. It starts at 8:30.
Is it?
It does. It starts at 8:30.
Everybody's shaking now?
No, I remember because I created the free tickets for the patrons on Patreon, so you can get in for free. I don't know how much it is for people who aren't patrons, but it costs money if you're not a patron.
Yeah, it's usually around 5 or 6 something.
I don't know what they're charging these days.
Yeah.
So plan to pay, like, I think 5,000 pesos. We'll update you.
When I was younger, it wasn't that much.
All the information's going to be on our Instagram. So you can see more information there. Or if you're a patron, you just get in for free. You don't have to worry about it. So your actual Patreon would pay for itself. You see how that works? Okay.
We're not good at math.
With inflation these days. Okay, so now into news. You have COVID.
So COVID update. As of April 9, which from today's perspective was yesterday, we had 3,368 new cases. I don't know, did you guys check today's numbers? Because I didn't get around to do that. But I think on Sunday they don't publish the numbers, do they? Because today's Sunday. Well, anyway, so As of Saturday, we got 3,368 new cases with a positivity rate of 5.39% and has been kind of fluctuating around that percentage for the last couple of days. So it seems to be stabilizing around that value. Now, I took a gander at my notes from the last couple of episodes, and the positivity rate 2 weeks ago was still at 8.38%, and before that was at 14.88. So like we've come a long way. So it's definitely gone down a lot, but it seems to be petering out. But let's see what the next couple of weeks bring. Now, that being said, currently almost 1 million people, or more precisely 956,552 people, had their mobility pass blocked because they haven't received their booster shot. Their third, right? The booster shot. Now, and it's not looking much better with the fourth shot or the second booster, if you will, because like 22% of the 22% of the people eligible to have received the fourth shot haven't gotten it yet, which is about 700,000 people, which is not minor either, you know.
I have to say that it is confusing because there is what they call what do they call it in? There's the refuerzo, which is the third shot, and then there's the cuarto dosis. Yeah. So I keep getting confused because they keep saying refuerzo, because at this point in my mind, the next refuerzo is the fourth.
Yeah, we had this discussion on the chat.
Yeah, I have gotten confused more than once because I'm trying to figure out, because my fourth is coming up, right, in the next probably month or so. So, but I keep getting confused because I'm like, oh no, I need to get my fourth dose, and then everybody's like, no, you're good, you're good, and I'm like, what? Yeah, just
disclosure here, we were talking on another chat the other day, and people were getting giddy because they saw the calendar, like the Minsa, the vaccination calendar, and it was like, and said like, people for your refuerzo, it was like, oh my god, I can get it now, and then we're having another look at it, and it was just like, no, hold on, they're talking about the first booster shot, because the second booster shot is called the cuarta dosis. So so first booster shot is refuerzo, second booster shot is cuarta dosis, which is kind of
You see, again, because I've had my third since October, like when I see refuerzo and I see like my age group, I'm like, oh yeah, and I'm like, wait, no. But they are up to October, early October, not quite me yet, for the fourth dose. So my thing is, I feel like when my friends Diego and my fiance get the dose right before me, Pinguino I meant, Pinguino's not my fiance. That's
keep on digging your own grave.
Okay. So what was I saying? Ah, dang it! You made me lose my train of thought. Oh, when they start murmuring about getting their fourth, I'm like, it's me, it's my turn. So, and we'll keep you updated.
Yeah, so, but as I said before, like you have almost 1 million people that got the mobility pass blocked because they haven't even gotten the first booster shot, which is a little bit like, okay, if you ask me, this goes a little bit against the latest measure that they've implemented, which has changed the paso a paso plan, which is what I'm going to talk about now, because they were like, okay, let's simplify this, let's be a little bit less restrictive, because like we got 94% people vaccinated, but I think they're not really considering that we have 1 million people who basically fall out of the scheme, which drives us down to what, like 80% or something. So that's, yeah, I know. Like that's like complaining on a very high level there, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, we're gonna have a new paso a paso plan as of April 14th, which is what was it? Thursday, next Thursday, or this Thursday when you listen to it. So the details will be known on Tuesday, April 12th. What's special about this new paso a paso plan is it's more simplified, and it only has 3 phases instead of the 5 that the current one has.
What phase are we currently in the metropolitan?
We are in phase 4 right now, which is phase 4 of 5. 5 would basically be no restrictions at all, as far as I understand.
I think there's still some minor restrictions.
Yeah.
On phase 5.
Yeah, could be, but like you wouldn't even notice that. So one thing about this new paso a paso plan, which has been criticized now at the beginning before it's being implemented, it's that it applies to districts or municipalities, if you will, like instead of regions. So it's going to be a little bit like it was in the beginning of the pandemic when they had like parts of Santiago like shut down. Like you couldn't go from Providencia to like the center, for example. It's going to be a bit more like that, because remember, lately they have applied the paso a paso plan to like regions. It's like the whole metropolitan region or the lakes region or whatever. So this is going to be different now.
I want to just specify for our readers who aren't from Chile or Santiago or whatever. So, for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, I lived in Las Condes, but I lived like less than a block away from Providencia. And there was a point in which Las Condes was like completely shut down and Providencia was not. But I lived like less than a block away. And so literally I was completely shut down, and I could just like, if I wanted to, as I would never do this, obviously, sneak a block over and I would be able to like, go do other things. So that's sort of what they're re-implementing, is that there's these it's not citywide or whatever. Right. It's these little divisions. No, it's not going to be that extreme, but that's how it was at the beginning of the pandemic. So there's going to be, which is why it's been criticized, because it's like, is there really that much of a difference between Providencia and Las Condes, et cetera, et cetera?
Actually, I'm going to get to that point, but it's I remember like I had people that were like, I can't get, like I literally work across the street. I can't get to work because it's like where the new district starts. Like,
right.
I can't leave my house. It's really weird.
But in some ways it makes sense, because, for example, the Las Condes has very large hospitals, right? And a lot of capacity for taking in people, while maybe, I don't know, like Puente Alto doesn't have as many hospitals or whatever.
Part of this new plan is, as we already mentioned, is partially doing away with the mask mandates, as you already insinuated. Not for indoor spaces. Indoor spaces, you always wear a mask. Tough shit, But for outdoor spaces, depending on what phase you're in, if you're in medium or low sanitary impact phase, you are no longer required to wear a mask if you are in an open space. As long as a minimum distance of 1 meter is being observed, which is such a theoretical, I can't even. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Now, experts are actually worried about this because of that. Because, as you just said, like, who's gonna check that? Nobody's gonna check that. Also, they say, like, right now we are experiencing sinking case numbers, which is great, but they also give people false sense of security. And don't forget, we're heading towards the winter. And new and more contagious virus variants have already been identified in other parts, like the Omicron XE and what was the other one, the Delta Cron and whatever, they're all over the place. And, the people were just like, we know how Chilean people are. People might feel entitled to stop using masks altogether based on their own judgment. It's like, don't even take the mask with them when they leave the house. So, last COVID-related news, as of May 1st, Chile will reopen all border crossing points now, also like land crossing. Travelers will still need a mandatory C-19 declaration form, including the whole daily self-reporting thing that you get on your email.
They don't do that anymore, the self-reporting thing?
Apparently they do.
I have not gotten it.
Well, maybe because you got tested for, I don't know, man. But, okay, another thing, my point was that you still have to fill out the C-19 form. You will have to provide proof of vaccination upon entering the country. And you might, as you said, might be randomly selected for testing upon arrival. And I think we just talked about this off the mic, which I think is a very interesting thing and very useful thing to let you guys know. Because if you don't get tested upon arrival, you have to pay the test out of your own pocket or either stay quarantined for... Was it on the podcast? Then maybe just... Yeah, but, it bears repeating, so there. Yeah. It depends if Pinguino cuts it out later. So, yeah, however, if the situation is getting worse again, the health ministry was adamant on, saying that, okay, they got, plans and they develop control measures that will be applied at the border crossing. So if things go to shit again, they're going to shut the show down.
They're going to shut the shit down.
Yeah, true that. So, yeah. So, so much about COVID.
Okay, so let's talk about water. So Chile is actually suing BHP, Albemarle, I don't know how do you pronounce that, Antofagasta, over their water usage. This is funny. So this is okay, so first of all, this article that I took this from is from The Guardian, and it's really funny because it says, and I quote, "The Chilean government of ecologist and feminist president Gabriel Boric is suing mine operations by giant BHP Albemarle and Antofagasta. I don't know how the fact that he's a feminist president like goes into any of what we're talking about right now, but I guess thanks the Guardian. I don't know.
Beard fetishes, borage, whatever.
Like and tattooed President Gabriel Boric who doesn't wear a tie. I don't know like how that has anything to do with this, but okay. Over alleged environmental damage caused in the northern Salars and the Araucanía salt flats, which is one of the world's is the world's driest place on Earth. So the State Defense Council, the CDE, legal action singles out BHP's Escondida, the world's largest copper mine.
I work in the legal department.
the Kalingas department. Antofagasta and Barrick's 50/50 Zaldívar operations and the Albemarle's lithium assets. So if you don't know, just some background, the water in Chile is all privatized. All of our water is privatized, which is obviously something that Gabriel Boric is trying to really like do away with. So like we have, yeah, you can exactly big water. Okay, so the case centers on the apparent deterioration of the I'm gonna butcher this Monturaqui Negariar de Loposo aquifer, an important source of groundwater. What? Yeah, I know. It was a lot because of the high pace of extraction to support mining operations in the area. So they're extracting a lot of water, more water than they're supposed to, apparently, and so that's why they're being sued. So the government agency argues that the mines named in the suit have breached the environmental protections, preservation, and conservation rules. The Monturaqui Negriar de Loposo aquifer has been exploited for decades by Zaldívar in the Negriar sector, Albemarle in Tiloposo area of the Escondida Monturaqui, court documents read. So
you pick tongue twister articles.
I didn't. It's just the names of the mines, okay? So the Escondida mine, which is the BHP mine, has extracted 1,400 liters of groundwater per second until 2019. Zaldívar, 212.75 LPS protected under 2025, which is the authorized flow rate of 500 liters per second. So they're doing 1,400 liters per second, basically, and they're only supposed to be doing 500 liters per second. That's basic.
Is more than 500.
1,400 is more, much more than 500. So, so the document's talking about how that the extraction of this amount of water is not only obviously bad for the environment, but we have a water shortage. We're in a drought, and this is in one of the driest places on Earth that they're taking this water from. Okay, so the Chilean Copper Agency, not the mine, Cochilco, estimates that the mining use of seawater, so because the copper mines that are owned and nationalized by Chile are trying to use more seawater and for a desalination process rather than fresh water, they're going to try to increase this 167% by 2032, and says that their freshwater use will decline by 45%. But by the end of that period, 68% of the water used by the industry will come from the ocean, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, though we did talk about that particular detail in the last episode too. I don't know if you cut it out in the end or not, but because, I mean, I'm all for like desalination, and desalination plants is great. I mean, Israel is doing this a lot. You know, we already have 18 desalination plants in the country. Thing is, like, it comes with its own bag of problems because you have, like, desalination plants have a huge environmental impact too, because what you are doing when you take the salt out of the water, you create brine, which has...
We can just pickle some stuff. It's fine.
Chile's got extra pickles, man. Like, this is...
Dude, Chile needs better pickles. The only things they have here are the German pickles, which are gross.
Great! What the...
I don't like German pickles.
What?
I want me some good dill pickles.
Those are the best pickles ever.
No, give me some dill pickles.
Those are dill pickles.
They taste sweet.
But they got...
They don't taste the same. They're not the same. You cannot argue that they taste the same.
Fine.
You've been to my home country enough to know that they do not taste the
I
same.
mean, they're a bit... Maybe you're buying the wrong shit. I don't know. So
all I'm trying to say is we need to pickle stuff that's better than what's here.
yeah. Well, Boric,
There's so
call
many
us if
things
you
to
need
pickle,
consultants.
And it's so easy, and they last forever.
Bailing things.
And
Boom,
using
problem
salt
solved.
from the brine water to salt our meat for the upcoming apocalypse.
Exactly. Well,
There you go.
talking about inflation, that's a nice segue. Let's talk about the economy a little bit.
So good at
Smooth, so smooth. So, the central bank revised their the goat projections. We're not going to have as many goats next year as this year.
Well, I don't want any more like gaberitas, so no more popcorn.
No more popcorn, palomitas, whatever. So the central bank they revised their growth projection for 22 and 23. 2022-23 that is. So while in December last year the central bank projected a growth of 1.5 to 2.5% this year, which is not great, but it's better than nothing. They corrected it down a little bit. Now it's only 1 to 2% of growth. And for 2023, they even expect the growth to be ranging from minus 0.25% to positive 0.75%. That means that we might be actually heading for another recession. Fun times. So one major reason for this correction is the rising inflation right now. So we are currently at an inflation rate of 3.4% year to date, and we're only in April right now. And if you are calculating the interannual rate of inflation, which means like the last 12 years, we're close to 10% already, which is what the central bank had originally projected for all of 2022. So this is far from the mark of 3% that they actually wanted to stick to. So that's a bit worrisome. Now, reasons for this are the increased spending of the last quarters, which, the first, second, third retiro had something to do with that. And yeah, which is that people could take money out of their pension fund to live. Yeah, which, a lot of people, I would argue, did that to survive. A lot of people also took out their money, just decided to just vacation. And all in all, the macroeconomic impact is that you have a lot of spending. You don't have an increase in supply. You don't have an increase in, don't have a growing economy, which means you up the inflation. So that's what happened. Another reason, it's complex, yeah, but it's part of the reason. Another reason is also is the conflict in Ukraine. And also other factors like the resurge of the pandemic in China, like Shanghai is under lockdown right now, so you cannot receive. Yep, and like if things can leave China or only leave China in a very reduced rate, that means that you don't get the shit that you need here, and prices are rising. So to slow inflation, the central bank is expected to raise the interest rates to 7.25% or even 7.5%. Well, the prime, which is loans on the one hand, but which would also be savings, for example. Like this goes both ways. Like you want to take out a loan, you got to pay more interest. But if you have a savings account, you also get more interest. Okay, cool. So that's a tool. Yeah, well, that's a tool. Basically, that's the most common tool that central banks use in order to fight inflation, which makes sense. But of course, it also hits the poorest the hardest because those are the people that rely mostly on credits. And don't have as many savings. And all the while, the fifth retiro, the fifth withdrawal, which is actually the fourth, but, they call it the fifth retiro, is being discussed, which could make things even worse right now with inflationary-wise. So, So an effect of the high inflation is that, of course, everything is getting more expensive. Now, chicken has went up by 9.1% in price. Bread has gone up by 5.9%, and sunflower oil by a whooping 32%. Now, okay, I sound it because it's funny because 1 or 2 months ago I saw memes all over Germany. Like my German friends on Facebook was like, sunflower oil is so expensive. I was like, what's going on? Everybody was absolutely oblivious, and then 2 months later it just hits here. It's just insane.
There's a meme going around that has like a bottle of Pisco that's cheaper than a bottle of sunflower oil, and they were like, decisions.
Oh, I guess I'm gonna cook with Pisco now. Yeah. But this price jump in sunflower oil is it's due to Ukraine and Russia being the world's biggest exporters of sunflower oil, as well as the production means of sunflower oil in the case of Russia. So that really is produced our own sunflower oil, wouldn't it? Well, Argentina does that actually. I was Argentina. A friend of mine just posted this meme. And it was like, well, why is sunflower oil so much cheaper in Argentina than it's in Chile? And then, the undertone was just like, oh my God, supermarkets conspiring again, which could be, but I think the more likely explanation for that is just Argentina is the third largest exporter of sunflower oil in the world. No. Yeah, and now Russia has actually sanctions export of sunflower oil to anywhere, so it's just okay. It's pretty much Argentina's like top 2 now after Ukraine. I think top 1 now because Ukraine is in shambles too. It is as it is.
They need that.
Yeah. So to deal with the problem of the rising commodity prices, Santiago's Pedro Aguirre Cerda district announced the inauguration of a popular bakery or bakery of the people. How would you translate that? It sounds so communist China. People's bakery. Yeah, that sounds nicer. So, and this is being funded by the municipality. Why does this gingerbread man look so lifelike? What's going on here?
Just like Diego.
Yeah, that's strange, but it tastes great. So yeah, this popular bakery, this community bakery, is being funded by the municipality, and it sells its products at cost. So that's a good thing. So this is gonna come down the pike. And one more thing, which I thought was just hilarious, because ironically, in the midst of all this, the public transportation panel of experts actually recommended to increase the price of Transantiago fare by 30 pesos or more to be able to compensate for the rising fuel prices. Which, I mean, taken out of context, this absolutely makes sense. But then everybody was just like, you remember the last time what happened when,
Also, why are the people who don't use cars the one who are having to pay for the rising prices?
Also, and it's just like, really, like, now of all times you propose, yeah, I mean, do it or don't, like, if you want to do it, fine, just hold off until things are a bit more stable and we're growing again. Because, okay, if you don't know what's going on here, what we're talking about, the 30 peso rise in fares that was planned was actually the straw that broke the camel's back in October 2019, and was like basically it started the Estallido Social, which led to the new constitutional convent, and this whole cascade of things happening. So yeah, it is very loaded. So doing this right now when everybody's bleeding and hurting, I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea.
I think it's gonna happen. The rise, really. But
I think they're just gonna get a rise. Want to get a rise out of us? Oh, God.
Okay.
Dad joke central. All right. Got something else?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with some trigger warnings here of what I'm gonna talk about and what Lenny's gonna talk about afterwards. So we have some trigger warnings for sexual violence and also violence against animals. So if that is something that you do not want to hear from us, feel free to skip forward to our next section that we're going to talk about, the Araucanía, which is a little bit also violent. So, but just in case you have certain triggers, the animal thing was a bit triggering for me. So if you don't want to hear those things, then you can skip forward. So this first one is there's closures of schools here in Santiago over sexual violence. So there have been student strikes which have forced several schools to close across Santiago amid of growing anger over sexual violence, which has occurred since the return to in-person classes. So it is March. They returned to classes in March. So this has not been something that has, they just returned back to classes. Yeah. So
because it's also mandatory now.
It's mandatory, right? So Javiera 17 says the demand is to stop harassment. She's one of the hundreds of girls to join protests outside of the prestigious Santiago La Staria school after male students were found swapping intimate photos of female classmates on Instagram. She said, "We are demanding justice for victims and for schools to stop protecting abusers." So there were some chats where boys were discussing gang raping their fellow students. And they were claiming the notorious, quote, Wolfpack case in Pamplona, Spain as, quote, inspiration, which I'm not sure what that is, but I'm assuming it's bad. So there were screenshots of the conversation that were circulated among female students in several Santiago schools who organized the protests in solidarities with the affected schools. So the La Staria school was closed for 2 days, and the culprits have been suspended while an investigation is taking place. Where are these parents? I swear to God, if I had a child that was a boy that did this, oh my gosh. oh, I don't even know what I would do. I would be, like, send that child to therapy. I'd be like, you are going immediately to therapy. Like, what is wrong with you, you psychopath? Okay. So the district's mayor, Evelyn Matei, launched a support helpline for school children affected by gender violence and has pledged legal action. And she said these threats are a crime that warrants action beyond school protocols, which I agree. So Javier, the 17-year-old I was talking about earlier, believes a firm response from authorities is necessary. And she says maybe the schoolboys haven't caused physical harm to anyone, but such talk can often lead to something worse, which agreed. So, but physical attacks have also taken place in Santiago schools. I think it was last week or the week before. It's that I think last week, a 14-year-old was raped in a classroom by an older student during a lunch break. So they haven't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Students and parents staged protests.
It's just not that the most shocking part of this is the lunch break, but it's just it's just
it's just unfathomable.
Yeah, and it's also like you
why aren't you eating?
And also, like, you wouldn't want to do this a little bit more in a secluded. It sounds like
but
you know what I mean. It's
yeah, it does sound like you're justifying it.
You're not afraid of anything here, like.
Yeah, because these people like live without consequences. Like these humans that decide that they're going to rape somebody. It's never about sex. It's always about power. So it's this power dynamic that this person thinks they can get away with it, and it's fucking it's disgusting. So students and parents are staging protests outside the school and pelting the building with rocks, demanding explanations. This one girl's father said, "I put my trust in the school, and they return me a daughter who has been raped." And he says this is a very serious situation. So according to the government's educational department, school children's sexual harassment complaints have increased by 56% in 2022, which makes sense. Yeah. But this was compared to the same period in 2018 before the pandemic.
Yeah, that's the point, actually.
Yeah, so what I think, this is my speculation as somebody who minored in sociology, this is what happens when, like, you don't teach humans how to interact with each other. Like, I don't know, like... Yeah. Is it that these boys are so freaking horny that they've seen a girl for the first time and they can't, like, keep it in their... I don't understand.
No, but it's not only about sexual violence. I think you've probably also read about, like, there has been, like, an increase in bullying, like gender-neutral bullying. So
yeah.
There's been this case, I don't know if you read about this, I don't know, I think it was a boy who basically just, like, got hogtied and they ripped out his eyelashes or something like
what
that.
What the F?
It was just heartbreaking. Why?
Why?
It suck. I don't know.
No, but, like, why is it increased?
Because, okay, here's actually, I wanted to send you an article about that. I forgot about that. There was, they interviewed a few psychologists about that, and they say it's in this age range where there is so much social development going on. The last 2 years have been just this big void, and they were just like, they forget how to interact with other people and how to be social again. So that kind of makes sense. And I think it's that, because you were talking about the reports, right? I think it's that actually more things are happening. But I also think that in a way, I think 2018, 2019 sort of marked a turning point in terms of people's voices being heard. Me Too, the estallido social, and all these things. So I think people also feel a lot more, especially women, feel a lot more comfortable reporting things like that. Whereas like back in 2018, 19, that might have not been the case to the same extent.
And then also, so here we have UNESCO reporting that COVID schools closures have been one of the reasons, saying this is probably one reason that there's more vulnerability in gender-based violence. So there's this activist, her name is Valentina Carrasco, and she says that she believes that the pandemic has exacerbated cases of gender violence in young people, saying the young people were at home for 2 years without seeing other people. Now they're in classes again and everything has exploded. Yep. I mean, again, like you said, that this is a very vulnerable age. These are people who have not socialized. These are like they've talked about it a lot as well. We've talked about, I think, on the podcast about like there's a lot to be said, like psychologically and sociologically, about like only having girls' schools and only having boys' schools, and how like when you do that, actually girls thrive because they are free from sexual violence, but boys really suffer because they don't learn to respect and the differences between men and women. And I don't know, like there's so many things that are in, like, have these boys been home for 2 years with like really shitty messages being like told to them by their families? Like, I don't understand.
Okay, let's head to the next trigger warning.
Animal violence.
Animal violence. So last Thursday, a mother went out with her 8-year-old daughter to the Barrio Mix to presumably do some shopping, God knows what. Girl got hungry, and the mom got her an anticucho, which is like shashlik skewer, whatever. Yeah, from one of those food stands. And little did she know that she was actually chomping down on dog meat and ended up with a dog's ID chip in her tummy, which had to be removed later on.
How did she know that ended up there? Is what I want to know.
Yeah, good question. They didn't specify that in the news, but
Read the article, it said that it was a dog chip found in the meat, and I just assumed she was eating it and then was like, what the fuck is this? Is it a bone? That's like, how did they know? Was she like they were the owner looking for the dog and her belly started beeping? Like, what?
yeah, I don't know. Probably I just like my guess is she was just like, okay, I swallowed something that felt a little bit weird, metallic, whatever, and then I think she went to the doctors. Was like, this is not feeling good. And what is this? And they scanned that. And, this caused a big brouhaha. And then health inspectors started cracking down on food carts in that area. And one important revelation did make the news. The chip belonged to a poodle. I just thought it was fucking hilarious that they really had to point this out on the news. But okay. Taking away them trigger warning. So remember when we talked about the government worker illegally downloading movies and series onto the work computer a few weeks ago? Yeah. So I do you one better. So the same guy that found out about the movie download now discovered that someone from the finance ministry downloaded porn on their computer.
History after that. Like somebody
Yeah, no. That was not the history. Remember how what this guy did is, okay, first remember that all government IP addresses are public. Right, and there is this website called iknowwhatyoudownload.org or .com, whatever, where you can put in an IP and then it just shows you whatever you downloaded or whatever that IP downloaded. Nope, you cannot delete that because clearing your history is a local thing that you do on a computer. That thing with the IP, that's in the internet registry, whatever. I'm not an expert at that, but it doesn't go away.
Finance ministry, like Borich's finance ministry?
Yeah, that just happened. Now, not saying it was the finance minister, but it was somebody who worked there. Yeah, I don't think it was Mario Marcin. Who knows? Now, yeah, so if you want to know the details, what he downloaded, or she, they, whatever, is Moms Teach Sex and Welcome Aboard XXX. So I think they did specify that in the news article, which is great. So yeah, so as I said, it was like the same guy who found out about the illegal movie download a few weeks ago. So he then informed the Computer Security Incident Response Team, the CSIRT, of the Ministry of the Interior, who then promptly awarded him with a nifty lapel pin, who he proudly showed off on Twitter. So that's what he got for it. Yep, he was happy. Okay. He got a little lapel pin, yep.
You mean a
lapel, yeah, not a lapel, that lapel. Lapel.
Like
it's like, it's true. Yeah.
I choose you, label.
Yeah, choose your label and porn or whatever. So that's what I have for news.
Okay, so I have one thing that's kind of fun with our dinosaur news. So there was an ancient cemetery of flying reptiles unearthed in the Atacama Desert. So the Atacama Desert is just a cornucopia of dinosaurs, if you don't know. So scientists in Chile have unearthed a rare cemetery of well-preserved bones of ancient flying reptiles that apparently flew the Atacama Desert more than 100 million years ago. The remains belong to pterosaurs. Scientists determined flying creatures that lived alongside dinosaurs and had long wingspans.
Like in a land before time?
It's not a pterodactyl. No. Pterodactyls are different than pterosaurs.
Oh.
But Ducky was not a pterodactyl either. You're talking about what's his name? No, she was a little duck thing. No, the pterodactyl's a different one. What was his name? Oh, if you remember his name, please message us. So, because there's Bigfoot, Sarah, Ducky, and Petrie. Petrie! His name was Petrie because he was a pterodactyl.
Who was Ducky then?
Ducky was the little duck. She had a duck bill. That's why she's named Ducky.
Yeah, I thought because pterodactyl.
No, you're thinking of Petrie. Like a Petri dish.
Petri dish.
Yeah. Aw, look at us. We're so cute. Okay, so it had a long wingspan and fed by filtering water through long, thin teeth similar to flamingos. I didn't know flamingos had teeth.
That is a very disturbing image right now.
I didn't know flamingos had
I
teeth.
didn't want to know that. Thank you.
I just saw some at Animal Kingdom.
Oh, hold on. I think I saw. They have like really like some rows of teeth and like.
Oh my
slanted-
God.
Oh yeah, no, I remember.
Oh
It
my
looks like straight out
God.
of a horror
Gross.
movie.
And they stink because they only eat shrimp. Oh, it's gross. Okay. So don't let them confuse you. Like they're not.
It's like
They are
sometimes
not
you
nice.
really don't want to learn more about
No,
the
I
animal
know. Like
kingdom
just
because
want to
it just
look at
ruins
them
it
look
for you.
pretty. Okay. So the group of scientists led by Jonathan Alarcón, an investigator at the Universidad de Chile. Jonathan, that's his name. I guess like Jonathan,
Yeah.
but J-H.
Jonathan.
Jonathan, it's Jota. Oh, anyway.
It's an English,
So have been searching for the Pterosaurus for years, but discovery has surpassed their hopes. He said this has global relevance because these types of findings are relatively rare. Alarcón said almost everywhere in the world the pterosaur remains have been very isolated. This discovery will allow scientists to study the pterosaur's habits, not just its anatomy. And he said we could determine how the groups of these animals were composed, if they were raised their babies or not. And another big surprise was how well these bones were preserved. So they're like one of the most well-preserved bones of this type of dinosaur, reptile, whatever. And so he also said most pterosaur bones that are found are flattened and broken. And he said we are able to recover three-dimensional bones, not just like fossils, which is pretty freaking cool. So there's that. Okay, guys, so here's the plan. We're going to talk about the Araucanía region. We're going to start with the history of the Araucanía region. Then Lenny's going to do a little timeline. And that's going to be right, so like more historical things today, like of the history of the indigenous people, the Mapuche. And then next, part 2, we are going to get really into the weeds of what is going on right now. So that's what's happening this episode and next episode. I hope you enjoy it.
We're talking about this big old dumpster fire down south, which is also
There are
known.
real dumpsters on fire.
Oh yeah, but mostly trucks, because let me tell you, if you're like an excavator or a truck, it's not a good time for you to be down south in Chile these days. You get set on fire. Poor trucks, poor excavators. So yeah, we're talking about the so-called Araucanía conflict, which is, well, boiled down in a sentence, the government versus indigenous people versus possibly some drug trafficking peoples versus
Xenophobic people.
lumber companies.
Oh, a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot. It's and I said this before off the air. It's just I wish I've had a kind of a doozy of a week, and I wish I've had more time to prepare this because there's a lot to unpack in this one. It's really interesting.
Super interesting. There's a lot to unpack here. We're going to do our best to get as much information to you as possible. If there's something you think that is really important that we left out, feel free to drop us a message. So maybe we can cover that, because we might need direction of like, oh, why did you not talk about this? It's not because we're avoiding it. It's just this is such a big topic that we might have just missed something. Or we're not scholars, right? We're just two people who like Chile who want to like talk about it. So I'm gonna start because I'm going to sort of give the historical context of where the history led up to where we are now.
Cool.
So
chime in and mansplain whenever I think it's
yeah,
necessary.
perfect. Love it so much. which is well, let's call it collaborating, right? Yeah. Okay, so the beginning of human history of this region.
The birds and the bees.
Of this region started 11,000 years 11,000 BC. That's what I'm trying to say. Which is considered the Paleo-Indian period. Paleo-Indian period.
Okay.
I think it's what it's called, or that is what it's called according to this article. So the first settlers of these South places were organized in family groups. They aren't necessarily in this moment identified as certain types of peoples because it was so long ago.
Right.
We don't have any specific information about it was this peoples or these peoples or that peoples.
I'd be surprised if that was the case.
Right, no. So they were organized into family groups of hunters and gatherers who practiced residential mobility, and they were the first people, obviously, to learn how to live with the land, with sporadic excursions to the coast, right? So then, during what's called the Arauco period, this was from 800 AC until 700 AC approximately. There were profound changes in societies that populated the south and central zone, which specifically was related to also like scarcity of food. There were changes to the way things were done because of scarcity of certain types of plants that had been like over excavated. Also different technologies, and they were able to create more intimate expressions of behaviors, according to this article. It says intimate expressions of behaviors, and settle a little bit more. So because of these developments of tools, they could have more types of agriculture. So anyway, 4,800 years ago, gathering people began to arrive more. So like more people became to arrive to the region, more types of indigenous peoples, which were leaving... which, again, we have a lot of people who are gathering fruits and plants because in these regions they were very populated with lots of fruits and plants. So it is at this point in history where we're starting to see distinctive indigenous peoples, because they were sort of like, okay, so we had these hunters and gatherers, and now we have the mixing of different groups how we're now making tribes that are now indigenous peoples, indigenous tribes. So for example, we are going to be talking about the Diaguitas, the Turtiruas, I'm really trying to pronounce that correctly, that have made their distinctive traditions, right? Now, and here comes the Mapuche culture, which is the main indigenous tribe that we're going to talk about. It's the principal indigenous group that still exists in Chile. So the principal meaning the largest. There are other indigenous groups that exist here, but this is principally what we're going to be talking about as far as the conflict in this region.
There are about 12% of the overall population.
Yeah.
I think, yes.
Yeah.
Of Chile, not only indigenous people in Chile, just overall Chile population.
And the Mapuche culture actually was a mix of different indigenous peoples before them, including the Pitren and the Vergel. Hoping I get close to those pronunciations. So this was a mix of those two cultures, and now they became homogeneous. So and they are just now recognized as the Mapuche, which the word Mapuche means like people of the. So you don't have to say the Mapuche people because it's redundant. Yeah. So the Mapuche people. I just said that was redundant. The Mapuche were relatively isolated after they sort of mixed together with other cultures. They had brief contact with the Inca Empire, but they never really reached that same area. And so they have some evidence of this sort of interaction, but not much. They were pretty much isolated in a lot of ways. So the inhabitants of the Incan Empire from the Mapuche were called the wild people. Ananrunasimi purum auca.
That's how the Incan people saw the Mapuche, or what?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify. The wild people. It is interesting to point out that the Mapuche were seen as like a very strong tribe, like very warrior, very strong, not necessarily a violent tribe towards other inhabitants because they didn't have a lot of that. But for example, when the Spanish came, they found it very difficult to fight the Mapuche because they were so strong in their resources and their use of weapons and tools and things like that.
It's kind of funny that the Incan people kind of, like how they saw the Mapuche, I think it's a bit analogous to how the Romans considered like the Germanic tribes, you know, those barbarians, like savage people, but like indomitable, you know, so like you couldn't really, you know, conquer them.
Even though there was not a lot of, like, they don't have a lot of evidence of the socialization between the Mapuche and the Incan Empire, they noticed that the Mapuche were so resourceful that they paid attention apparently and took all of the things that they liked from the Incan Empire and brought it back with them to their isolated, because they're like, okay, so we see that there was a socialization, and now we see that this stuff exists in Mapuche, but we have no other evidence that they ever saw each other against. The Mapuche were like, that is really interesting. We like that shit. We're going to take it with us.
Yeah, I read that something about that too. There was like this kind of artifact that they found there from like a not Incan, but also like some other Andean folks that Andean people, Andean folks, like Andean people that they just like, the Mapuche were very adaptive. They even found like Polynesian chicken there.
Yeah, they like basically, like, I guess that's one of the reasons why they were, I guess, so hard to colonize and I guess defeat, because they were so resourceful, like, and capable of adapting. And again, another reason why their culture survived so long. So in 1536, the Spaniards arrived, and the Spaniards were called Wincas by the Mapuche, which means the new Inca.
That's what it means.
It means the new Inca.
Oh, okay.
So with this contact, so they arrived in 36, and there was also a battle between them in 1536. Like, immediately the Spanish were like, get the fuck out of town. And this battle occurred in Renoelin, and the Spanish conquerors named that the Araucano.
Yeah.
And which we have the Araucanía, right? So that's related. And this was first used by Alonso de Ercilla in 1589. So that's the first time we've seen this. And Arauco is derived from the word rago, which is white chalky water. It's a Mapunangun word that means white chalky water.
Why was that picked for?
I did not find that out.
The white chalky water people.
Yeah. So this is also synonymous with Mayeco, Mayoko, or Mayarauco. White chalky water. I guess there was a lake or something there that was white and also chalky looking. So there's that. So
So that's the thing.
So there were different, of course, words that they would use to describe the Mapuche, including like Pinkun, which meant north, or Wili, which means south, like, but not just like words that they'd be like, as Pinguino was saying, like the Spanish would hear a word and be like, this was what this means, and it didn't mean any of that. It just was like words that they use.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah, it means go away. So at that moment in history, right after, so if I didn't specify that battle, the Spanish did not win. The Spanish had a really hard time with the Mapuche, which vexed them quite a lot. They were quite vexed. So at that time, there was over 180,000 Mapuche living on those lands, which did have mainly Mapuche. They also were some Pehuenche tribal people living on, but much smaller groups. So this was then named by the Spanish the rebellious region, since that battle, the rebellious region. And the Spanish continued to conquer most of Chile, but could not defeat the Mapuche and also the other small tribes that were in that area, because the Mapuche were so fierce and I guess resourceful as well. So Pinguino mentioned that another reason why it was really hard to defeat the Mapuche is the Mapuche didn't have like one centralized like king or leader or like chief, because a lot of times what the Spanish would do with indigenous peoples is they would find like the power head, kill the power head, and then like the other, it was easier to like subdue the people. But since there was no one person as like the tribal leader with the Mapuche, it was harder to do that. You actually had to kill a bunch of people. So, yeah. So this is interestingly worded. This says, after the independence of Chile, which means like the independence from Spain. Let's be not an indigenous people's independence. Right, is the independence of Chile from Spain, right? The Chileans held a general parliament that was included with the Mapuche who lived south of the Biobío River in order to agree on a statute that would regulate relations between the Republic and the Mapuche. This was held in 1825. However, various events occurred that forced the Chilean state to allocate resources to the border areas, which made the Mapuche very upset. So then, during the Revolution of 1851, General José María de la Cruz, leader of a coup movement, recruited several Mapuche loncos, which is heads of communities. Again, we don't have we don't have one centralized person. We just have little heads of the communities. Yeah, and so for this coup in 1851, they recruited these Mapuche people to take arms up against the government. With this insurrection was completely crushed by General Manuel Bulnes, and instead of surrendering together with De la Cruz, they refused to surrender, and the Loncos were subsequently killed. Right?
Fuck that shit.
Yeah, like they'd never give up, never surrender. So then we have, and more history, so a French adventurer named Aurélie Antoine de Tunens.
Oh, I've heard of that.
He went to the area of the Araucanía and made contact with the Loncos, which again were the community leaders, who were really interested about founding a state for the Mapuche people as a form of resistance to the Chilean army during this time of what's called the Arauca War. And in 1860, he founded the Kingdom of Araucanía and proclaimed himself king. Of that area. So he proclaimed himself as the title of Aurélie Antoine the First. But during the following days, the constitution of the kingdom, because they had to create sort of a constitutional set of rules, they declared the annexation of Patagonia, which established limits on the river, the Biobío River, and also the ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean, which is kind of weird. And
Patagonia is also part of Argentina.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because the tip, yeah, the tip, just the tip.
I got confused there too, because when they in Argentina they say the Mapuche are people of the Patagonia, and I was like, no, they're not. And then it's just in Argentina they define Patagonia going way more up north than here in Chile.
Yeah. Well, and also something to mention is there are a lot of Mapuche in Argentina as well.
Yeah, which we had just thing about.
Yeah, we had a
fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that's dumb. Okay, so Okay, so the Chilean government, however, under the command of President José Joaquín Pérez, ordered the arrest of the King Aurélie Antoine the First in 1862.
I'll start introducing myself at parties like
Leonard Kruger the First.
You're Leonard the First. I'm just gonna keep on insisting. No, the first.
The person, the Antone the First, was arrested, transferred to Los Angeles. We do have a Los Angeles here in Chile, and imprisoned, and then sent to Europe. And then in 1879, the last, what is considered of this article, the last great Mapuche uprising, again, according to this article, took place in the current region of what is now Araucanía due to the migration of Chilean forces to the north due to the War of the Pacific. So because of the War of the Pacific, there was an uprising because of that, those battles that were happening. And if you don't know what the War of the Pacific is, it was a war between Bolivia, Peru, and against Chile. And that's how we stole Bolivia's ocean. And the uprising was put down, led by Cornelio Saavedra Rodriguez in 1881, ending the process known in the traditional Chilean history as the pacification of the Araucanía, which sounds super fucked up. Yeah. So, and in this time, the Araucanía area was then totally occupied by the Chilean government. And they started to carry out different state projects, which had been planned since the Spanish were there. Like, the Spanish already had, like, certain ideas in mind for these, like, area, like, how to colonize it. And they sort of used those same sort of ideas of colonization and settlement in that area. 1881.
Okay, so that was, okay.
So the Mapuche, this is like horrible, but the Mapuche were then relocated to, quote, reductions with their respective merced title, that is community lands of reduced extension, so that they could practice livestock activities, but they were removed from their land, put in, like, I guess, yeah, they removed from their land, put in, like, reservations.
Yeah. And not like one big contiguous one, which is like
sporadic.
Here and there and there.
And there's a lot of these that are still there to this day, that a lot of Mapuche still live in. And so these occupied territories in the Araucanía were given to both Chilean and European settlers, mainly Spanish, German, French, Italian, British, Swiss, and I'm like, so European settlers. It's like, it says mainly, and then it just lists like 6 different countries. So, Spanish, German, French, Italian, British, Swiss.
Right.
So in total, between 1882 and 1901, 36,000 Europeans arrived, 24,000 hired by the colonialization agency, and 12,000 arrived by their own means. Can you imagine? It's called the colonial, like, it's called like the agent, like, yeah, like, that's so bad.
Just colonize now.
Yeah. And this was a part of a process called the European colonialization of the Araucanía. That's what it was called. Like, obviously translated, but that's like the direct translation from Spanish. I'm like, so they we're colonizing. Fuck off. Like, that's proud of it. Yeah, so that's the history of where that puts us to about now.
This is Lenny's part now.
Yes, this is my part now. This is my show now. So yeah, so you brought us up to speed in the history. I'm going to get a little bit more into the modern history, what's been happening there, because, I mean, as you could have told, the relationship of the Mapuche people with the colonists, with the Chileans, with the Spanish, with outsiders, so to speak, has always been a bit tense. But then again, like, that kind of applies to every country on the American continent, every country everywhere in a way. However, in recent years, like, this conflict between Chileans and the Mapuche people has flared up a lot, and actually it's one of the, if not the most prolific conflict in the Latin American continent these days. Because, I mean, you could also say, okay, yeah.
As far as, like, indigenous.
As far as indigenous, yes. Yeah. As far as the indigenous communities go, because you could say, okay, well, the U.S. had the fair share of troubles with the indigenous people, which continues to present day, that there has been, tension and disagreement, but not to the extent that we are seeing here. Because right now what we're seeing here in southern Chile are acts of violence, is arson, there is murder, it's really a shit show down there. Yeah. So let me give you a little timeline of what has happened to give you a little bit better understanding how this conflict escalated lately. So in a way, as a starting point, I would say let's pick 1989, which was when the then presidential candidate Patricio Aylwin, Patricio Aylwin presented the Acuerdo de Nueva Imperial, the Nueva Imperial Agreement, to some of the the New Imperial Agreement. That is not it's not a good name, no. But Nueva Imperial is a town in the Araucanía region. And that agreement basically sought to strengthen the rights and representation of indigenous people in Chile, which is actually, it had a few good ideas in there. And some Mapuche leaders did sign that agreement. However, Aucan Wilcaman, who was the leader of the Consejo de Todas las Tierras, which was one of the most influential Mapuche groups back then, he said, I'm not going to sign that. Why exactly, I'm not quite sure. I think it was probably because it didn't go far enough for him in terms of granting more indigenous rights. Now, that's kind of where this whole thing started. He was like, no, I'm not doing this. Like, you got to bring more to the table here. Now,
Started as far as like
Yep.
the direct conflict, like political conflict more than.
I think, okay, I'm just speculating here. So what Patricio Aylwin, who was not president by then,
No,
gotta
because he
say,
did eventually become
he
president.
eventually became president. But at that time, he was like, okay, he was also the first one after the transition to democracy.
Yeah, he was the
right?
first
Yeah.
president after the dictatorship.
So he was just like, okay, we just got out of the dictatorship. Okay, like, we want to have good relations with you guys. So I know things have been kind of shitty under the dictatorship. So let's work on this.
Finger
Okay.
guns. Ding,
Yeah,
ding,
bing, bing, bing. Let's work on this. And I think, and please correct me if you know any better, I think what Wilkaman was saying was just like, good start, but not enough.
Not enough, right?
Not enough. We need more. We need this faster. Like, I'm not signing this. You know, shove it up your. So fast forward some 8 years, December 1st, 1997, 3 trucks were burned by Mapuche activists in the town of Lumaco, and this pretty much marks the first violent act of the Mapuche conflict since the country's transition to democracy. So this is where this whole thing really started, to get violent. Fast forward some 11 years, on January 3rd, 2008, the Mapuche activist Matias Catrileo was fatally wounded by the Carabinero Walter Ramirez during an occupation of the Santa Margarita estate owned by Jorge Luxinger. Now that name might sound familiar to you because just 5 years later, Mapuche activists went to confront Werner Luxinger, who is the father of Jorge Luxinger, and his wife Vivian McKay. And that confrontation ended with the house being burned down and both senior citizens there, because they were old, man.
Yeah, this is the crutch of so many anti-Mapuche
exactly.
sentiment.
Yeah, that was really when it really got ugly, because they just burned down the house. I guess it was in a way retribution for whatever happened to.
There's a lot of controversy around it. There's a lot of the house was burned down, but it was unintentional. But there were people inside, and they died because the actual trial. Are you going to talk about the trial?
Not that much, but I'm going to say what I was going to say is that the only person that got sentenced there was the Celestino Córdoba, who was also a Machi, which is a community leader in the Mapuche culture. And he was rather influential, and he was eventually sentenced to 18 years of prison without parole. And this became actually one of the most high-profile cases in the context of this conflict. Now, details aside, what we know is that, yes, these 2 people died in the fire, unfortunately. Who was responsible or not for that, okay, maybe that's on a different page, but that happened.
What I'm trying to say is this is a very much one of those hot button things where if you try to talk about the Mapuche conflict with some Chileans, they'll be like, yeah, but the 2 old people that died, and it's I'm trying to have a conversation with you about the Araucanía region, right? And you can't just mention that particular incident, especially since several people who were on trial were deemed as innocent. But you can't just point out one event and be like, this is the reason why I believe this. There's no other reason why to talk about it. Bleh. You know what I mean? It's okay, there are other things involved here, and it seems to be much more complicated. But as you said, 2 people did die. Yeah. But it's a very controversial moment in this conflict.
As I said, it's one of the most prolific things that have happened in the context of this conflict.
If you mention it, every Chilean knows what you're talking about.
Yeah. And as a consequence, actually, the Bachelet administration, not the Piñera administration, but the Bachelet administration, implemented the Pinochet-era anti-terrorism law in the region, which gives law enforcement a lot of authority to just, Yeah, I think a lot of people go well, Piñera. I was like, no, it wasn't Piñera. it was Bachelet in this case.
Where her moderate comes out.
Piñera, tightened the screws a little bit further down the road, as far as I understand, but it was Bachelet who actually implemented this whole thing. So, okay, let's just leap another 5-6 years forward. November 14th, 2018, farmer and activist Camilo Catrillanca, who was also the grandson of a Mapuche chief, who was shot and killed by a member of the Special Forces Jungle Commando, as they were called, because they suspected him to be involved in a car theft, which in reality he had nothing to do with, really, And I think this is also considered to be a turning point in the conflict because as from this moment on, the incidents increased like exponentially. It was like every semester, it was just like, okay, 5 incidents here and maybe 10 there. And then all of a sudden it was like, bam, 50, 70.
He was profiled.
As he was Mapuche, he was very well known in the area as Mapuche. He's a very open, vocal activist, and these the jungle whatever were these carabineros were they shot an unarmed man and killed him for no other reason except for he was Mapuche.
Yeah, and not even only unarmed. Had also he had no involvement in whatever was going on. He was just
Involved.
he yeah.
Still not an excuse to shoot.
Right, he was quote unquote collateral damage, if you will. I mean,
It was crazy.
well, another turning point in this whole thing was February 8th, 2020, when Mapuche activists set fire to a truck in the town of Victoria. And no, supposedly unbeknownst to them, the driver, Juan Barrios, who was still in the driver's cabin resting and therefore was unaware of what was happening. So,
Yeah, because there's beds in the back of this truck.
right. And like they didn't know he was in there. He didn't know what was going on because he was sleeping. So Barrios got severely burned and he died a few years later. And at that point, this was when the powerful truck drivers union entered the. It was 2 years later, yeah. A little less, actually, just one. No, sorry. I mean, just he died a few days later.
Oh, you said years.
No,
I was
no.
like, wait, what? A few days later. Okay.
He just held on. No,
Yeah,
it was a
I
few days
like,
later.
Whoa. So, yeah.
So what I'm saying is like this is relevant in terms of this macro in this conflict because this was the point where the powerful truckers union came into the conflict, and this is also now when a lot of this conflict has become economically a lot more significant to this whole thing because they were just like, okay, you got to sort this shit out or we're not shipping goods back and forth.
Yeah.
You know?
Something we've mentioned it several times before on the podcast. So if you're this is your first or you missed those episodes or maybe you just don't remember, because of the shape of Chile, truckers have a lot of power. They can basically say, I'm not shipping that, and the entire like economy is affected from north to south. They have a lot of power. And I mean, they've been wielding this power since truckers could truck. And
Trucks be trucking.
yeah, and so it's a very historical thing that affects the economy, which Boric wants to change by creating a train from north to south.
So the same year in June 2020, the ex-member of the CAM, Emilio Berkov, was arrested after a sting operation that found him with 200 kilograms of cocaine paste with an estimated street value of 3.8 billion Chilean pesos. And the government logged this as a win against the alleged drug trafficking operation in the region. Now, to just clarify, the CAM is it's kind of like the most prolific Mapuche activist organization in the region. It stands for Coordinadora Arauco Mayeco. And why is this important? Why is this relevant to this whole thing? Is because this was, I don't want to say the exact moment, but this was one of the most, let's say, one of the most prolific moments in which the public opinion started linking the Mapuche conflict with drug trafficking, you know. And this is also when the public opinion in parts swayed a little bit. They were just like, oh, those are not activists down there, those are terrorists and drug traffickers who just, you know, want to keep their drug business running, and this is why they attack people and do everything, you know. Again, there's
So many other factors.
yeah, and also like I don't think it has been definitively it has not been proven that they are involved with drug trafficking or not. I mean, the matter of fact is out there that there is some drug trafficking going on, but in how far that is linked to the Mapuche activism is not really clear. So it's a thing. So half a year later, in January 22nd, 2021, the Mapuche activists forcefully entered an estate in the town of Lauratio.
The town hall.
Yeah, and they expelled.
Right.
Well, yeah, was it the town hall, right? Okay, and they expelled the inhabitants and set fire to the building. And this is also an important point because until this point, the focus was mainly on the machinery of big lumber companies, but not on individuals, you know. And it wasn't really going into civil society, so to speak. Now this is
And they're focusing on lumber companies which
Yep.
are destroying their land.
right. We're gonna get into that in a bit, then. And then as a last point, which was in October 12th, 2021, President Piñera declares a state of emergency for the provinces of Malleco and Cautín in the Araucanía region, as well as for the Biobío and Arauco provinces in the Biobío region, which means that the army can basically give the police force logistical and technical support, conduct surveillance, monitor, control public gatherings, as well as traffic the region. So they really doubled down with the military in this region. That was just last year, which escalated, which Boric now has put an end to. Which jury's still out how this is going to play out, but hopefully which is going to pacify the conflict a little bit. But you can see from 1989, the guy was just like, we're not signing this, and there were little skirmishes here and there, and now we're like full out. It's almost a civil war down there. Like, you got military down there, you got a state of emergency declared.
You have citizens, civilians protesting against the Mapuche. You have Mapuche people who are pacifistically trying to do. There's a lot. We're gonna get a lot more into the weeds of this and discuss it more in our part 2 episode. So if the timeline was like, wait, I wanted more detail, we're gonna give you more detail. Don't worry. But it is so complicated that we needed to have the timeline first. To see the timeline. Then we're gonna get more into the weeds, more into like the specifics in our next episode, which will be part 2. Let's do that. So thank you for listening, and don't forget to support us on the Patreon. If you like our stuff, maybe join the Patreon for a couple months. We can buy some more beers to drink as we discuss these things.
And by beers, we mean professional sound.
That's actually our goal. But either way, we're going to use that money for the podcast, put it back into the podcast. And so support us there. Check out those events. We have the trivia night on the 23rd of April, the bilingual comedy show on the 30th, and the storytelling on the 26th. We'll have all of those posts on our Instagram, so check it out. So we'll see you back for part 2, and when in doubt, bye.
Bye. The Chile Today podcast is hosted by Lennart Kluge and Bethany Francis and produced by Diego Pinguino Rivera. For more information on the news topics you heard today, check out chiletoday.cl.